Hello and welcome. You're listening to Let's Drone Out. Today is a Thursday and it's episode 396. So we are almost to the 400, guys. We're going to have to figure out what we're going to do for
Great
400.
work, team.
I'm proud of you guys. I'm glad we're here. Cole's going to be unfortunately a little bit late, but today we're joined by the man with the moustache, Stephen.
Good evening, everyone. And Jack, lay in the fireworks for 400 if we haven't.
Yeah.
Got any?
Everyone's favourite Curry Kitten.
Hello.
And I'm Brighton Till I Fly. Hello.
Hello. So what's everyone been up to this week? We had a rare sunny day. A day with clear skies.
Are you talking about Monday?
The infamous
Monday, which I've called an oasis in a desert of shite. It was amazing. It was both sunny and calm, which is amazing because either side there was like weather warnings where it's between 40 and 50 mile an hour wind and rain. And I managed to actually fly, I think possibly for the first time this year. Maybe I went one time before.
What did you fly?
The little plane. The little plane I talked about.
Oh, yeah.
The one that's this big, which worked really, really well. Caroline in the chat said it would work well, and it was really good. Until I tried to go. Is it an E-wing? No, it's
It's an E-Sheen. It's the same as the Volantex. We were talking about this last time. A little 1S jobby with built-in stabilization. It's a Zero, I think, but built-in stabilization.
There's lots of companies that make something quite similar. And this was really good for the fact that it did work in stabilization. Once I put it into expert mode, I kept crashing it over and over. And this prop thing is bloody genius. If you crash, the whole thing pops up and it just goes click, and the whole thing just clicks in. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So I crashed this about 5 times, one of which is like smack straight down, and no damage at all.
Squirrely.
Brilliant. I really enjoyed that.
Looks box fresh.
How small?
I think it's 400 millimeters. So it's really small. So it's 1S, and you do need a very calm day for it. But that battery it said it would run for like 10 to 15 minutes, and I was flying it for over 20 minutes. Although it does include me going and finding it whenever I crashed it. But it just went on forever and ever. Really liked it. Which is just as well, because the quad I took, I managed to forget to double check that the gyro was facing the right way in Betaflight, because I just upgraded the firmware. This is the one, Steve. This is the problem quad that we talked about before. Yeah, and I forgot to check that. So as soon as I put the power on, it went and flew up in the air and fell down again. So yeah, I forgot to check that. I just assumed it would be okay. Completely my fault, but that's sorted again for next time. So just wait another 3 months. Perhaps we'll have a day like that. Be able to fly again. Excitement.
You can see why I do the whole taking off with the foot thing in my room now, because when you finally do make it out, at least you know it is going to fly in some capacity.
Yeah, I use a crappy 18650 2S, and I put that on there, and it needs like 2/3 throttle to hover, but it's just enough to check whether it's going to freak out.
Genius.
No, it was when when you're sort of. I'm slightly rushed into it because Pippa's got COVID at the moment, so I was kind of running around after her, and then I'm just like, oh my god, there's a good day on Monday. I need to charge everything, and I got the batteries charged, the GoPro's charged, everything charged. I just double checked it again on my radio to make sure the modes worked and stuff, and the props were running the right way. Didn't think to try hover because it wasn't a new build. But I'd upgraded Betaflight. And it had rearranged the gyro rotation without me knowing because I didn't
the
test
previous
that.
version had the default position in a different orientation, and it defaulted back to.
So it's like, I think your gyro is at -180 when it should have been -270. It's simple as that. So when you pitch forward, it thinks it's going that way and rolling. So that's only going to end in tears. As soon as the throttle goes up just a little bit, it's like something gone wrong, and the props then spin up to try and correct it. And
I know how to correct pitch. I use these motors. Oh, that's not doing anything at all.
That's not the right one. At least Betaflight is pretty good when you're taking off, that it detects a runaway quite well. Yeah. And it's like, something's gone wrong here. I'm upside down, and I don't think I should be upside down.
There's been a bit of development on that as well, because there were a couple of people who found that when they engaged beeper, that switching from beeper mode to, like, if the radio was disconnected, sometimes the ESCs were thinking it was PWM instead of D-shot and firing up. So there's been some extra safety stuff there as well on the arming side, and everyone's in on it, like the Blue Jay guys, the AM32 guys, and Betaflight devs. For some reason, there was a delay when you had the beeper on, and then that you disconnected the radio and reconnected it. It could somehow fudge the delays such that the ESC would kind of reset into I'm in PWM mode now or something, and it went a little bit nuts, but that's apparently resolved. That it can occur with
one to down.
It's happened with Beal Heli 32. I don't think Beal Heli 32 has a fix yet. It's just like riding very close. Like there was a 320 millisecond timeout, and something was waiting 250 milliseconds, and something else was delaying it by a fraction, and it just pushed past the 320 millisecond timeout and went into to PWM somewhere. I don't know. Very odd indeed.
That's weird.
So, Stephen, you've got a little bit of news. Frank posted a link, and then you reposted it.
1, 2, 3, click. There. All right.
There we go.
So this is from Twitter. Thanks to Frank for this excellent little tidbit from UAV
Thank you,
Hive.
Frank.
And UAV Hive has something to say about Gatwick, the old problem that has been here for so long. The latest Freedom of Information Act to drop, combined with an Ministry of Defence one some months since, is pointing to there having been a drone at Gatwick, likely some redacted toy that fell out of the sky of its own accord, probably even on the 19th at the very outset, and the authorities were too embarrassed to admit they'd been chasing nothing for days afterwards. It's in the DFT's own Gatwick incident log that London Gatwick had photos of something at the outset, which they never released to the press, but the photos made it to the MOD. Interesting that Giles York told the Parliamentary Defence Committee that no photos existed at all, which clearly isn't backed up by the incident log. Thereafter, it was panic and a load of assets deployed. Despite Ministry of Defence advice against it, both kinetic and jammer equipment was in place and approved for use by the end of day 2. This was kit that was alongside the MOD and RAF. Sorry, this was kit alongside that the MOD RAF were deployed with, which was showing that there was no drone flying about from day 2 onwards. So there was a lot of evidence to say that nothing was in the air. They'd got photographs of a toy drone, and they refused to release those photographs. And they even refused to show the photographs to a Parliamentary Defence Committee. So someone has gotten very, very embarrassed by this situation, and instead of admitting that there was some incompetence, they've decided to cause a national panic. Great.
So it sounds like, if we're getting this right, there was maybe a report of a drone flying, which was maybe true, and it crashed on its own accord. Surely the thing to do was look at it and say, oh, it's just some plebby toy thing that's maybe just got out of control and flown a thing. No reason to panic here, which would be the obvious response, instead of jumping up like crazy people and saying, shut the airport, we're under attack. And I hear these things can fly for 2 hours in the dark and rain and might buzz our tower again and again, which seem to be the stories coming out.
Well, we've got this very murky situation where at the time Gatwick was changing hands, and there was probably financial penalties associated with this type of incident that might have had real effects on the actual price that Gatwick was being sold for. So it's all distinctly murky, and I guess we'd have to really follow the money, but I'm not sure anyone's put together that trail of evidence so far. It appears someone somewhere needed an incident. They needed a spectacle, and a kind of look over there, don't look over here style of misdirection, and for whatever reason, they decided to point at a toy drone and tell everyone the sky was falling, as Karen says, chicken little.
Yeah. Or some
If
sort
you
of
could see the
weird.
photo, I expect somewhere in Gatwick or somewhere there's a bag with a tiny drone in it marked "Don't show this to anyone" or something.
Yeah. Rob was flying this on his lunch break. Please don't mention it to anyone, or something like that. But yeah, it seems to have just marred the whole hobby for years. And when we cut through all the hyperbole and the hysteria, what we find is that it's entirely misrepresented and blown out of all proportion, which none of us inside the hobby were terribly surprised about, having seen the ludicrous claims that were being made, but which the general public seems to have entirely believed and seen it as justification for, criminalizing this swathe of air usage.
Yeah, it was one of those interesting times. Normally, when you watch the news and it's something about a subject you don't particularly know, you just watch it and say, "Oh, that's interesting." But watching this, knowing the amount of bullshit that was being spouted, it was like, "Oh my god, how are they saying this? This isn't true," and all that. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
I even had like friends of like other parents from like Sophie's school at the time that were air traffic controllers that asked me directly if it was me. It's like, "It's not you, is it? You didn't do this, did you?" I was like, "No, it was Tony. That guy on the van with the goggles."
Yes, he's standing.
Allegedly, may have been Tony. Don't forget.
We already did the disclaimer. It's fine.
Yeah, we didn't read it out. Any views expressed by any guest of this show are personal and may not reflect the view of others. Tony was there. There was video of Tony there. With
wearing goggles.
Yeah.
Standing on a van looking very suspicious.
He wouldn't have picked up anything because there was a jammer there anyway, because it was already pre-installed.
It's just a ludicrous situation. And the trouble is, I feel no matter what evidence is produced at this stage, it's made that impact. It's marred the reputations of many hobbyists, and it can't be undone. And it's really annoying that there's not going to be an apology. There's not going to be any recognition of actual evidence. It's an argument that's been made and passed and accepted purely on hyperbole, and that's the way it is.
My question for you two and anyone in the chat: do you feel that that incident has had an effect on us legally, as as a community, or do you think all the sort of like rules and registration were all coming in anyway?
I think they're coming in, but it certainly sets the public mind against us. So if anyone does end up in a legal situation, then you're going to be judged by a jury, and the jury is going to have seen this kind of reporting.
A wild coal has appeared.
It definitely affected things for the worse. I mean, it was already starting to be threatened, but as soon as that got into the public eye, and the public, being a bit stupid and misled by the news, were literally saying these should be banned, these are terrible, they need, and really behind registration. And I remember us like arguing this at the time, and it's just so stupid. They kept showing things like, "Oh, drones are dropping things into prisons. Drones have closed down Gatwick. How long before a drone takes someone out the sky and kills hundreds?" And like, we just made the very simple point that if you're going to do bad things, then you don't submit to registration. Like people that rob banks generally steal a car for their getaway car. They don't use their own because it could be traced back. And this was all so very obvious, but the government felt it's literally say there was a drone problem, we fixed it. We've put in these restrictions and we can do worse things. It was just a box ticking thing, which somehow cost millions of pounds, even though it was a simple database with like 100,000 entries. Somehow cost millions to write and maintain. Hello, Cole.
Well, we are where we are.
Hey guys, sorry for showing up so late. I was stuck
Cole's in
traffic
the
there.
West Wing again. I see where he keeps his piano and entertaining area. It's nice, Cole.
I just text you. Your audio is just a little bit backgroundy. Wondered if you can
Oh,
go
is
into
it?
settings, audio, echo cancellation.
He must have some guests just out of camera shot there.
Yeah, what about
it's
this? Is this any better?
Yeah,
Hello?
loads.
Cool. Yeah, so at first I was using my laptop microphone, and apparently that was giving issues. And now I'm using my display's microphone. So
Yeah, display's microphone's good. It's just a bit echoey because you've got no shit in your house anymore. Because you packed it all away.
yeah,
It's just an echo chamber.
yep.
It's just nothing on the walls.
There's nothing.
have echo-
It's just
Yeah. Well, here, let's remove the. Well, you're not gonna be able to see everything, but
hold the cats up either side to like act as like fluffy barriers.
let's see. Hold on.
I mean, you're trying to hide that room, Cole, but the amusing thing is, it's the cleanest room out of all of us.
I know. Oh,
Please muffle my sound.
Nobody's
curry.
Cole's
Yeah.
like, oh, you
could
might
do
see
that.
you might see a cable in the shot. Oh, that's terrible. Meanwhile, just piles of crap littered.
Well,
Yeah.
really, there's not that much. There's a couple buckets,
Yeah.
keyboard stand in the mirror, a rack mount thing that I've put a piece of bag over, and then that's not my desk, but yeah.
There's some nice little monitors there on the desk as well.
Oh,
Or
yes.
monitor speakers.
Oh, there you go.
Nice.
There's a little...
One day you'll have to go in there and scrape all the
gunk? Yeah.
the gunk out of that because it's conductive. All the glue they put in them.
Yeah, apparently these speakers can be bad after a while, but I've had them for like 10 years. They've been fine.
Oh. Yeah, I went down some kind of audio nerd thing and for a second briefly considered buying active monitors and spreading them around the house, and then I thought better of it and decided just to stick with headphones because it was much saner. And buying like random used Genelec monitors on eBay seemed to be a somewhat crazy idea.
I got
Oh,
me a thing.
GPS. Is that a
GPS.
BN or a BE? That's BN. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Has my stuff showed up yet?
It's supposed to be here within the next 5 minutes, apparently. So.
Nah, fair enough.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you guys, what's your guys' opinion on this BN220? You guys used it
It's
before?
been around
GPS module.
forever.
Yeah, they work fine. It's very generic. It's the old I forgot what it is now. It's the same GPS receiver that lots of other things use, and they seem to work fine.
Because I was at the store and the guy was basically saying, you can get that, or you can get like a Maytech one, which are like apparently better. They have a little bit more.
They come with
I guess-
silicon cables instead of PVC cables. They're a bit easier to solder.
Sorry, you bought it from a physical store?
Yes, I did.
Canada, mate. I know.
Yeah.
God.
Different world.
Go on there.
Have you guys ever been
Crazy.
to Rotor Geeks or ever shopped from Rotor Geeks?
No.
Damn it. David, where's my nice screwdriver? Hello, Dorothy.
Oh,
She's in the mirror. We see her.
I know. Oh,
Oh wait, and there's two cats in frame now. There's one there.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
one- yeah. So I finally got myself a 5.5 mil box driver, and this was only like $5, which that's not bad. But
not very
Yeah.
deep though, because like
When you say a
no,
box driver, what's a box driver?
hex
Um,
driver.
He's trying to say hex driver.
No, it's a nut spinner.
Yeah.
oh well, for $5, it'll do.
Yeah, I use little sockets on mine, so I've got all the different sockets for tiny sizes.
Oh yeah. But yeah, so Curry, I was actually at a physical store in the Toronto area. There's about
business.
2 or 3 different physical stores around the Greater Toronto area that you can actually go to, and
It's incredible.
yeah, it's pretty cool.
They all went
And they're
out
not
business
just
there.
because in the UK, when you go to an RC store, it was like you were stepping back into the 80s, where there's this new technology called a lipo battery, and if you wanted a 3S 2200, it would cost you about £60.
Yeah,
And
and they tried to
and
sell you
they
nickel
had-
metal hydride first.
Yeah, and they had lots and lots of balsa, and everybody that works in the store apparently don't know they work there because they just ignore you and read magazines and don't do anything. But I'm amazed not only they're physical stores, but they're selling FPV kit essentially.
Well, Rotor Geeks is basically FPV centric store, and it's not the kind of store where you walk in and there's this big gallery and you can look around on the shelves and whatever. It's more like there's like it's almost like a strip mall. Do you guys know what a strip mall is? Like basically a bunch
is it
of
like going
businesses-
to an off license in Streatham or
is a strip
Brixton
mall
where
just
you
that
walk up to
sort
a
of-
plexiglass window and you have to point at things behind the plexiglass window, and the guy behind the counter squints like you might be trying to rob the place, and reluctantly
I
hands
thought
you
the strip
goods,
mall was when you had
maintaining eye contact.
the sort of square of shops all in a sort of a square rather than like an indoor
Right.
mall. Sort of thing.
Well, put it this way. Basically, so you're on a main road, you turn into like this, almost like a plaza, I guess, where it's like, it's one solid building, and then there's different doors along the way, and you can go in, and there's just different stores. Well, Rotor Geeks is like, you walk into these like this foyer, you turn to the left, it goes to one store, you turn to the right, there's another door, and then it's basically just, there's a door, you can step in like one step, and then there's a little counter, and you can say, hey, I need this, I need that, I need XYZ, and then they go, oh yeah, all right, do it up on the computer and give it to you. So it's not quite as fancy as I guess maybe I made it sound like, ooh, you can go into a store, but I think Rotor Geeks, they've actually been around for quite some time. They've well, Jack, you ordered stuff from them ages and ages ago, right?
Yeah, it was the original Cobra Motors, but it was sort of the second or third batch, and they were thank you, Flight One. And unfortunately, there was a few in there that you just plugged in and they just smoked instantly.
Huh.
So it was a bit of a nightmare. So I ended up sending back about 2 or 3 of them, which is dumb, really, because the air miles on that is ridiculous. And I could have harvested the bells and, bearings or whatever, but David didn't believe me. Obviously, didn't know me from Adam, but
like, who's this British guy ordering stuff from Canada?
Yeah, I know.
What's
I
he
was
sending
just
back to me?
it was just like, you can see that they've had like no packs on them, and like the prop nuts haven't even been used yet, and you plug them in, they just smoked. And it weren't Rotor Geek's fault. It was just like Cobra. Like Cobra lied about the size of their stator. They were, they were writing it down as 4 and it was 6 and mil or something. I can't remember. And just the quality kind of dropped. And it's right before the time of the red bottoms, really. And as soon as the red bottoms come out, the power difference and their neodymium magnets, they became the motor to get. But they were aluminium and made out of cheese.
We really should have a drinking game every time Jack mentions red bottom motors.
Yeah, I know, isn't it? I don't even like them. I've got a video
shot,
of me killing them. I'll
I
have a look.
4 of them, and I liked them until I crashed into steel and concrete.
Yeah, that's the only thing with them.
Yeah,
I still got some Cobras that work fine.
They're a bit rattly after a while. They're really rattly.
Just gone zing, seems all right. Some zing and RCN power.
My delivery is late, Jack.
No,
I do have some LDARC ones where some of the motors have counterclockwise thread and some have clockwise thread, because someone thought that their motors were strong enough to actually unscrew the prop. Clearly, an assumption that didn't hold out in the long run. But I've got one quad where I have to remember to unscrew the props in the opposite direction, which always catches me out.
I dislike that. Just
Why?
have them all going the right way.
Yeah.
Just...
Unless your props are like 20 inches wide, there's just no way that the moment of inertia is enough that you could do anything to a nylock nut.
Yeah. I mean, you can if you don't screw them down properly, but or you don't have a locking nut. But that's
Or if you don't
not
screw
really
them
the case.
down properly, that's a whole different thing.
Well, yeah, at the start of the episode before I was here, I saw you guys, Curry, you guys were talking about your plane excursion. And yeah, that looked like a lot of fun. But it was really crazy how the wind really affected it at that one part of the field.
Well, that's the main part of that was me flying low, trying to catch it on camera. If it was up in the air, it'd have a lot more time to recover. But because I wanted to sort of like do fly pass, I was kept bringing it in low. But yeah, you get things like that. You'll find, especially flying planes, lots of people know this. There's sort of areas that will produce certain the wind will go around there, and like just flying over treetops always produces a lot of turbulence and stuff like that.
Because you had a hedge right there, and the wind was hitting the hedge and then just bumping straight up.
It was right in a corner. Something was going on there. It was like it was rolling back or something. It was really weird. But you just like don't fly low over there, and you'll be all right.
Yeah.
What we're looking at is
here,
it going
Jack?
to get itself on fire?
Yeah, of course.
It looks like have you connected all 3 phases?
No, there we go. Kill it with fire. Yes.
Oh dear, oh dear.
Notice the the title of it.
Dead.
You don't want to be searching.
Yeah, so that plane was like 70 grams, wasn't it, Curry? It's incredibly light.
Yeah, super light. Although I said I wasn't going to mess around and do anything with FPV, but a couple of guys have replied and said, we're flying ours with an all-in-one camera, and it's absolutely fine. In fact, they said it's a little bit. Someone said it was a little bit tail heavy, which is why it's so hard to fly out of stabilization. So maybe just popping a little all-in-one just up here or something.
Yeah.
Pop it there.
Well, if you can fly for 20 minutes on the existing battery, you could go for a smaller battery probably and recoup some of the weight of the VTX.
Yeah, that's true. But the VTX is like a couple of grams, one of those little all-in-one jobbies, and they're absolutely fine. I've just stuck them on everything. I've stuck one of those on a Scalextric car, on a remote control Snake.
Those
everything.
all-in-one Whoop VTXs, the 25 milliwatt ones.
Yeah. You don't generally get them now, but Ishin did a whole bunch of them where they're literally just like it's literally a little camera with a VTX stuck to it. Because I remember when a cow ate the camera, I just managed to take the VTX off and use it for something else.
The board is the exact same size as the camera board, and then it's got a little soldered-on antenna at the top.
Yeah, it's just literally like 3 solder connections.
Yeah,
to get on there.
Yeah, that'd be perfect on that. Of course, you need to make sure there's a 5-volt line inside because it's only 1S.
Those cameras will go on a single 1S battery.
Oh, great!
They go 3 to 5 volts, generally speaking, so they're absolutely fine. You just take the line off the main battery, and you'll be fine. So I might do that. I just say it's going to be so long before. I mean, Caroline told me that she has one and it flies fine up to about 10 miles an hour. But even because I'm right on the coast and that feels very open, it's very rare that the wind's as light as 10 miles an hour. But we'll keep trying. And if it's windier, it'd be fun just to see what happens. I can fly backwards.
I did notice, because I saw your video, in one direction we could really clearly see the plane like moving across the frame, and you turned and it just whipped right back in no time at all.
Good fun. That's why it'd be nice to have something bigger, but it swings around about, isn't it? Because I think you could take that into a park and no one would get too offended, depending on the park. But as soon as you go bigger, where it will fight the wind, and I'm thinking something like the old Zode Dart, which is one of my favorite planes, which is still a pretty small plane, and would fly for like 20-25 minutes on a 1300 3S, but it's obviously bigger and louder and heavier. Yeah. But it will, it will cope with the wind. So
the noise really speaks to people's sense of danger. Stuff like this, I can fly little micros around the park, but if I start like flying, or even just like an ultralight on 4S 5-inch, people don't pay any attention, but you break out like the 1900 kV 6S, and suddenly people are like, "What the hell is that noise? What's going on?"
Yeah.
I find
But you only have to be like a certain distance up, and they won't notice it. But of course, that's not the sort of flying you do on a quad, because that's no fun. You can't dodge around trees if you're above them, can you? Sorry, Jack.
I find with like flying in wind, it's more. I find the greatest effect is more to do with the weight helps with penetration. The heavier you are, I find the easier to get in, to fight the wind. I found, and the other thing
but then you need a bigger motor to take the weight.
Were we talking about in planes?
Yeah, in planes, yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you've got something quite heavy duty like those right wing planes, they don't even seem to notice the wings, and very aerodynamic. Like the wings are pretty nice in the wind, much better than like a more traditional plane with like a rudder and stuff, where the wings will just cut through really nicely and just whoosh along.
You mentioned you had some issues with that, where you were having to really carefully coordinate the turns, right? Because it just lose lift otherwise, and the motor wasn't strong enough to power out.
Yeah, so if I was in yank and bank mode, so I was just using the one stick, and I would pull back on the elevator to try and get it to turn more sharply, which it didn't seem to like. It got a bit squirrely and sort of, help me, I'm in a stall. But you just feed in a bit of rudder and aileron and leave the elevator alone completely. Then it was absolutely fine, which is actually the right way to fly. I was in wing mode. I was like, oh yeah, I've got this rudder thing, which is interesting because often I fly a wing and I'm doing a turn and I'm like, oh, hang on, the rudder doesn't do anything, does it? That's no good. I forget about it.
Right. So you're saying with wings, fundamentally, extra power solves the control finesse issues. You just power through it.
I mean, yeah, extra power solves a lot of things. Again, it's a balance. The old Bixler, its original motor it came with, was so efficient. I could fly for like 30 minutes on a 2200 battery. But if that got into trouble, full throttling, it could get stuck in this nasty sort of stall where I just could not pull out of trouble, and it would like, oh, I'm falling. And with those big wings, the wings would go down and it would wing stall, and you'd have to try and recover and stuff like that. So that bigger motors on that now, but it will fly for half the time. So it's like, oh well, that's not as good, but it is better. But yeah, power equals get out of trouble fast. A bit like quads.
Yeah.
On my old 3S, it's like you go into a dive. Several seconds before you hit the floor, you go full throttle, and then it sort of slows down.
Mm-hmm.
With like 4S, 6S, you're like, oh, I'm an inch from the ground, I should throttle up, and you can still get away with it pretty much, can't you?
In 6S, you can just kind of be like, right, I'm going to clip the ground, take a little bit of grass, and just rock it out of there. And the full throttle is like, I found with a lot of quads, I don't fly with GoPros, and it's kind of amusing to get up to full throttle. I should probably like motor limit them, but I just keep that full throttle for moments of sheer joy when you're just like, right, let's be stupid, let's just whack it on full throttle. And I know if I'm like down at ground level and I do just an instant like flick up the stick like that, then I'm going to pull like 100 amps out my lipo. My voltage is going to drain, but by the time I realize that I'm 99.9 meters up in the air, I'm looking down at the beautiful scenery.
Hey guys, last week we got a lovely donation from Win, so massive thank you to him, and here's a waffle.
Wow,
thanks, buddy. I hope
QN
that made it worth your while.
a jubilant waffle. Thanks, man.
Yeah. One thing I will say about pushers is on my AR wing, I done the whole thing where I done like standoffs for the motor to move the prop even further away from the back of the wing, so you don't waste a load of energy with like the noise and like efficiency, better efficiency. But the trouble is with doing that is you have to put more weight up on the nose.
Yeah, I mean, wings are loud for that reason. unfortunately. But yeah, I find the further out you move the prop, the less wing-like it looks. It just kind of looks like a backwards plane at the point where it's like wing
Yeah.
ends and then sometime, and then here's a prop over here.
Does that tend to unbalance the prop if you put it like way out and don't tie it to the body? Does it encourage vibration and stuff like that?
I don't know. I don't think so.
It kind of depends what your quad's made of. Normally in a wing, you'd have like the body would be shaped and there'd be a motor mount. You're only talking about these things where the more modern wing, where you've got this sort of central column where you might be
extending off the motor.
further.
Are you moving the entire motor back, or are you putting like a prop extension off the motor? Oh, right, okay.
No, yes, so there's the firewall, which is what you screw the motor to, and then there's standoffs, and then the motor then sits on that.
Oh, okay.
The only real downside is obviously the weight thing. You have to put more weight at the front because you've got a bit of leverage there, and you could snap your motor off more easily because obviously it's stood out, and more leverage, easier to snap off. Cole, do you want to read this one out? Like, comment, subscribe, thumbs up.
Thumbs up, guys.
Yeah. That's really enthusiastic.
Sorry, I was sort of zoning out there for a sec.
Every EB. Oh, I never know how do I pronounce that. By the way, Alexander noticed you from last week, and he was like, "Yo, you're cool."
Ever FPV?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, dude, I'm pretty sure he's like a team pilot for Kiss Ultra, bro. I think he's like a tester and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see him in the Discord all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Or they, we don't know. But yeah, like it. Just pleased to see you. You did get noticed in our chats. So thanks for always tuning in. RC Dude seems pretty pleased to see you.
Dude!
Curry, any news on whether you're going to get a replacement back for your Radio Master box?
Yes, according to Radio Master, they're sending me one. Although I think they have got the right backs for the actual release. So I think everybody that had a Boxer
pre-production bottom.
Well, essentially, I don't think they were in mass production by the time I told them, and they said they actually went out and bought a ghost module special to see if they could fit it in and change their design. So I think hopefully everyone that's actually ordered one as a customer has got a proper one. If not, talk to Radio Master and say my module's stuck in the back of my box. How do I get it out? The answer is how to get it out.
Other people and they a couple of racers who were using Ghost, they were surprised to hear of this. So it sounds like that the real release versions didn't have that flaw.
Yeah, I think so. Which is kind of why it's like it's pointless to me to talk about it and say, hey, they've repaired this, and everybody else was like, well, mine's fine. It's just
kind of weird how, because they'd made a ton of radios before that. It's weird how they chose a different dimension for the new radio when they've made like thousands of T16s.
It's really curious. This is not their first radio, and it's not their first time with the full size JR style module. Something just must have got missed somewhere. They didn't particularly test it out, and I think one of the problems is their Ranger module didn't seem to suffer from the problems. The problem is not the fact that it's a bit tight, yeah, especially with Ghost. It's like knock it in there. That the problem is to get it out. There's no flex in the back because it's so tight. So to get it out, if you unscrew the back and the back's away from the main body, there's then more flex in the plastic, and you can get the module out easy. So I guess they've either made it bigger or they've made the walls thinner or something, so there's a bit more give in it. It's really
just one of these things where people have been making JR-based modules for ages, but there's no published spec, and everyone just goes by some rough agreed upon measurement that isn't accurate enough.
It seems that way, just given that I notice certain modules are slightly tighter than others, and other times it's quite hard to get modules to line up on the pins quite nicely. I've had it before, especially with Crossfire, that you can miss the pins and they'll go
And
up someplace.
Yeah.
I had to dismantle a tracer module once because it just got wedged with the pins stuck in a funny angle.
Weirdly, the R9 module has some of the best design for getting the pins lined up because they've got these nice round holes and it's sort of
got like cones
with the pins quite nicely. Yeah, so that goes in nice. But yeah, I don't know. It's all vagueness, isn't it? I'm sure there's not like a release spec where JR says this is the thing for our modules. It's just each manufacturer kind of vaguely copies the other one. And it's I don't know how Radio Master didn't test this properly. I guess they didn't test it on enough range of modules not to see it. But hey, they fixed it, and I don't think any property is affected.
There was an interesting surface transmitter that was released by Radio Link, the RC8X, I think, which claimed it did Crossfire on a surface transmitter. But then I looked at the video of how they wanted people to wire it up, and they're like, yes, so you just use the trainer port. What you do is you get a trainer cable and then you cut the end off and then you solder 2 pins onto the trainer cable and then you shove the 2 pins up into the module for your S port or whatever, S bus and ground. And then that's fine. And like, this is just, there's so many ways this could go wrong. So you need to power the module externally and you've got to make sure the ground is tied to the radio ground or you're in a world of pain. And then you've got to hack up like a headphone cable and solder to these tiny wires inside the headphone cable and then manually insert 2 pins. This is what their video, they didn't even have like, you know how sometimes you just have the pins on their little board in a row, like Maytech.
Can you find this video and play it to us?
It was
just amazing.
I can probably.
It sounds like
so bad.
It's kind of like how old school 433 worked, which was always trainer cable and it's just the PPM signal going into the old thing. But that's because it didn't have a special protocol and that's the way things worked then. But that, you know, it's 10 years ago. It's more up to date now.
I do kind of miss flying Crossfire, but then equally I don't.
It's all I've ever known.
I'm okay because I've got so many models around and I haven't got enough money to buy lots of receivers every time like the flavor of the month changes. It's like, well, that's on Crossfire, so let's get Crossfire. That's on ELRS, and that's so let's fly that. The only thing I won't fly anymore is R9 because I was like, ugh. It was always bad even when it was going. So it's just like they all just get converted over to ELRS. It's much better.
How
but I still got stuff quite happily.
Yeah, how's the Open HD stuff? Is that what you were working on with the soldering of the Raspberry Pi?
Yes, for people that aren't privy to our group chat we had, I was having a problem with a Pi and I asked the guys to sanity check it, and Stephen very nicely spotted I'd managed to. What you have to do, you have to solder things on to USB instead of using a USB socket. So I'd soldered on, and just a bit of the solder was just clipping something else, and that was causing the USB to fail completely. Oh my god, this looks horrendous.
This looks like a war crime.
Like what could possibly go wrong? This? So for our audio viewers, we've got someone who's got a Surface transmitter with one of those little headphone socket trainer connections. And the video is...
Can you explain what a Surface transmitter is?
Sorry, like a car one with a little plastic wheel on the side and a trigger, a pistol grip, and it's got some relatively fancy color display that looks a little bit basic, but we can see protocol output mode is set to CRSF, which on the face of it looks great. But then the means of connecting CRSF as recommended by the manufacturer, this is from Radio Link, this is the manufacturer's video. They say get a headphone cable and solder 2 jumpers to it, and then just kind of poke the jumpers into the module. Just kind of hope that you get it right, and just jam them in there. And this is probably how you want to do it. And the module has to be powered by an external XT30 while you're doing this. And it's just like, let's just hope that nothing goes horribly wrong, because we've got a battery powering the module. We've got a battery powering the radio. The grounds aren't tied together until you actually link them like this. It's all just... You could really quite easily end up with magic smoke coming out of your Crossfire module, I think. It's not... I don't think I'd recommend this approach for someone. I'd probably say, put this in a bit of breadboard or one of those little plastic pin holders, and then label which is up and which is down, and be very careful about plugging it in. And then once you've tied this Gestalt nightmare of Frankenstein's monster together, you've got a headphone cable stuck out the side of your pistol grip transmitter. You've got a Crossfire module hanging off the headphone cable, which is also hanging off a LiPo that powers the Crossfire module. And you've got to somehow drive a car while holding this kind of electronic net of chaos.
Yeah, that looks...
It's just...
Yeah.
How
And
much
then
is
you're...
the
How do you do
VCC?
that?
Do you know?
It's
Is it
2S.
battery voltage?
It's going to be
So
2S.
7 volts.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, there aren't any, it would seem, particularly long-range car transmitters. But if you really wanted to do that, get a regular transmitter.
That's the hilarious thing. Like, this is a 300 currency unit, top-of-the-range transmitter. And this is the solution. This is their premium solution, right? Most can't even talk Crossfire. This one can. And the way they've decided to recommend doing it is just to kind of pilfer an old headphone cable, solder jumpers on it, and sort of poke at a Crossfire module, which I guess you're supposed to hold under your armpit or something while you use the radio. It's somewhat chaotic.
It looks
I mean,
like
call me crazy, but build their radio with a module bay if they're going to support external modules.
Exactly, Gary. I mean, they put it in the firmware. Maybe they hacked it in late, but the really obvious go-to would be to have one of those little nano adapters just on the opposite side to where the wheel is, and you just slide the thing in, and you never think about it ever again because it's not going to fall off or catch fire or tangle you up when you try and drive the car. But just, yeah, that one caught my attention. Just a real weird one. Not sure quite what was going on. I like the fact that it does include CRSF support. So, hey, you could use your ELRS kit there as well for a cheap solution. But please, just give us a bay. Give us an external bay, and don't make people go through this chaos with the trainer port, because there's way better ways of doing it. In fact, Radio Master, if you're listening, please just make an HTX pistol grip transmitter. Move that whole scene out of the 1980s and into modern times with an HTX pistol grip transmitter that gives people all the power of HTX for car users. That would be fantastic.
Will they be able to understand the whole programming HTX malarkey? That's the problem.
You can ship with a default model, can't you? I mean, there's only like 2 channels to worry about, so it's fair assumption you've got steering and throttle, and if it doesn't work, you swap the channels the other way around, right?
You could have extra buttons to make extra exciting things, especially if you're doing the old super scale. I'm driving around pretending to drive a truck, and I need 10 channels to do my lights and my engines and my indicators.
Anyone wanting to do head tracking would have a much easier time.
Lurky, we want your opinion. Would they adopt this, or would they reject it? They like, I drive car. HTX too tough. Hurty brain.
Just have a wizard that says, twist your wheel. Okay, I've got that one. Now use your trigger. Okay, we found the 2 channels you're on. You're good.
Yeah, simple as that, right? Yeah, I mean, it's hard to map channels where you've got like something that might fly off and go crazy, but the car where one of those channels is just going to wiggle the wheels in a really obvious fashion and not damage anything, and the other one you could just keep to a very, very small amount, you could easily just be like, are the wheels waggling or not?
Oh dear.
So I did not say that.
Car guys can't even make a mix as Lurgy.
Yeah, I mean, there is that whole barrier, because a lot of them just buy the receivers with the transmitter, and they don't do anything more than like bridge 2 pins. That's the beginning and end of it.
I don't understand why more car drivers don't do more with this sort of stuff and FPV. When I was watching a while ago, and Caroline mentions Kevin Talbot there, I saw the speed championships at this airstrip somewhere in North England, and they can get these cars up to 170 miles an hour. It's really fast. And what they have to do, they have to drive it as far as they can see. They have to ponce about with some Futaba pistol grip thing to try and get better range, and then they have to drive it towards themselves very carefully and go zoom, and hope they can direct it through the two speed things. If you just had FPV, you're just like, okay, no problem, and you had a decent radio where you didn't need to ponce about trying to mod Futaba things. You'd be.
I'll go even further. You could have like a little radar where the gate is, and just have a HUD that shows you where the gate is. Oh yeah, it's left a bit, right, perfectly lined up on dead center, and just gun it, and off you go.
Yeah, it'd be laughing. We should build a speed car, but they're so expensive to build.
Yeah. You end up with like 12S, 14S components, and they're just ludicrously costly. It's a massive gulf between 2S and 3S stuff and the other stuff.
Sorry, Carl.
Almost like drag racing kind of cars you're talking about.
These perfect.
No, it was purely a speed thing. So they go one at a time, and they just basically hit through these sensing gates that says how fast they're going, and there's records held. And I think the record's something like 200 and just over 200 miles an hour or something in one of these cars. And of course, if they wipe out, it's pretty spectacular, because you can imagine the number of rolls and spins one of these things gets when it goes.
And they're doing it with like 12S worth of 5 amp hour lipos. So those things fly out like
huge amounts of lipos in series and in parallel, and multiple motors and ESCs like this big that do 200 amps and stuff. But yeah, it's impressive, but it's very expensive builds.
Yeah.
Curry, what's with the facial hair? How comes you've got a bit of a beard going?
It's quite a lot of a beard actually, but it's see-through because it's grey. It looks kind of not like a beard.
Wisdom beard.
Yeah, I like it. I feel
you have to be in it for the long run and grow like a big massive one.
I'm going elder statesman at the moment before I try and go Father Christmas.
I recommend elder wizard.
I can't compete with you there. There's no chance.
I've just got lazy programmer beard. It's so close to being a neck beard.
This is the most I can grow. It just ends up looking it just grows long afterwards and not thick.
No, this isn't particularly thick. Well, it doesn't look thick because it's all different colours, grey and slightly less grey. But but yeah, I found a way of having my CPAP machine where it will actually adhere to the beard and doesn't just leak. So
you have one of those. Do you have sleep apnea or?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Because
from his Johnny Davis.
I wondered if it's a random topic, but I wondered if I have that because I tend to snore pretty bad sometimes. But.
Well, there's snoring. Sleep apnea is when you you stop snoring and breathing, and then suddenly you go, when your brain says, "Oh, you're dying, wake up." So it's pretty easy to test. You just go to hospital, go to a sleep clinic, and they'll film you, pervs, and measure your blood oxygen and how many times you wake up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But your partner will know if you've got it, because it's suddenly like you were snoring and I wanted to kill you, and then you went quiet and I thought, thank God he's dead, and then suddenly you went and started snoring again.
Big gasp of breath kind of thing, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I guess maybe not the topic for LDO, but I was just curious how that is when you're sleeping. Is it uncomfortable or?
What, the beard or the mask?
The mask thing, yeah.
Yeah, it takes a while to get. When I first started, I had this sort of triangular one, and that just gave me a blister one day. But I've gone through about 4 different ones now, and now it's fairly comfy. Yeah. It's just a bit different on this because it sort of pokes a bit and stuff, but it's all right. Yeah. Saves me shaving, which is nice. Yeah. I was checking with Pippa because I got back from holiday, and I sort of shaved it I got beard trimmer, so I shaved it like 5 mil. And I was like, what do you think? And she says, it's okay, keep it growing. I said, "Do you want me to tidy up these bits or underneath?" And she's like, "No." I think she's attracted to tramps, so I'm going tramp look.
I'll be back.
This is Project Air.
Rocket. So on a more RC related note, there was a blokey, calling it Project Air, who put a rocket or a couple of different rocket boosters onto a foamy. And he was well pleased with the results because he thought that foam planes can go no faster than 140 miles an hour. And we know from one of our previous guests, the excellent Omagoogly Bird, that they certainly can, because he hit 300 mile an hour on props.
Yeah, Rupert's a good friend of the show, very good bloke, and the ultimate speed demon. He's been doing this a long time. And basically, it creates so much torque launching one of these because they fly a very, very small prop with very powerful motors that spins at almost hypersonic speeds. So if you've seen him hand launch this, the first thing it does is spin round like 20 times. He's a very good pilot and can handle that. For me, I'd just be like, oh my God, it's dying. So this is his world record one, which he gets a drone to drop. And you see when he starts to motor up, the first thing it does is still torque rolls. But, I mean, at this point, he's already beaten Project Air by some way. And I know Roots he used a tracker for a while because when you're going this fast, you're 10 fields over before you've turned
his
around.
His airspeed, he's hit 400 there. And 400. He's keeping it open. And there we are. He hits 500 kilometers an hour.
509.
I think he was talking miles an hour with this. So that's like 200 kilometers an hour. But yeah, that's still like 2.5 times as fast as the
yeah, I did comment on Project Air's video that he should go back and look at that, because before you go rockets, you've got to look at what you can do, and part of that is getting the right battery, the right sort of prop, because as soon as you're getting ultra power, you'd think like, oh, you want a big prop, but the prop comes way down because you have to spin the prop so fast to catch some air that it's kind of crazy. Funnily enough,
it must be in kilometers an hour, because if it was miles an hour, then that would be like 800 kilometers an hour.
What are we talking about? Which dude?
The one we showed was 300 miles an hour or 500 kilometers.
Yeah, 509 kilometers per hour or 316 miles per hour.
Here he goes.
Yeah, he's super like metric.
He opens it up and he hits like 140 mile an hour. But the rocket engine actually burns out rather quickly, and it seems to eject.
They have a very quick burn time, and they just do that really fast acceleration, don't they?
It really needs more than
two
one.
Interesting things. I mentioned the speed record things, and Project Air was actually there running a rocket turbine car, which he crashed, which was quite amusing.
So that's not even. It's 140 kilometers an hour versus who's doing 500. So yeah,
that's Back to the Future.
Yeah,
he's got just perfect to get his flux capacitor going, but bad for anything else.
He could do so much better.
Also, Roops has run that speed stuff with jet turbines as well, which is slightly crazy to watch.
He got only a couple of mile an hour slower, I think. He just beat it with a carbon fiber custom prop that he had, and he was like 2 or 3 mile an hour slower with a jet, I think he said.
Yeah, the jet wasn't amazing. They were very expensive and go into nasty crashes. I remember a couple of years ago he bought this amazing, it's just a thing of beauty, this pure carbon fiber thing for speed. I was like, that's amazing, when are you going to fly it? And he's like, I don't know if I am, because it's very expensive and it's so pretty, and I didn't want to ruin it. It might just hang above my fireplace for a while. So who knows? I haven't seen him for a while, as I was saying to Stephen. He's had a child in the last couple of years, so he's probably a bit busy there.
So I wonder if anyone knows Project Air. We could kind of chat fast planes if they do. Could be interesting.
He's done a lot of stuff, hasn't he?
He's done quite a few.
But yeah, let's send off an email, see whether we can get them on. should we call it there? Anyone else? Or forever hold your peace?
Well, I was going to show one quick thing. I think I showed this to you the other day, Jack. And I just wanted to see what your guys' thoughts were on it, because I'm still relatively new, a couple of years in, or less than a couple of years in now. But let me present. I saw this on one of the local groups, and what do you think of that, guys? And what is this? And what is happening here? I need some explanation.
Wow.
It's watermelon propellers.
Someone has
Someone
the
has
receiver is more important than a battery.
Well, this is what happens when you get your first radio and you get your FlySky receiver with it, and you're like, okay, well, I guess I plug the servo cable to each of the bits in the.
No, they're
the
using
Beaver board.
iBus.
Are they using iBus? Well, that's a start. Yeah. But you can buy a smaller receiver. I mean, back in the day, I think
that's all you had.
Yeah, my tricopter uses one of those great big Turnigy 8-channel things, and you just like everything's plugged in.
There is one very early.
I'll start with this and move up.
I know for a fact because I tried to help someone upgrade. There's one very early version of this FlySky receiver where iBus isn't supported, and you had to do like PPM. So there's one like cursed model, and if you get the absolute cheapest radio that's available, it can't even handle iBus receivers, and you end up with just monster
garbage.
Builds.
Yeah. Oh. So that was a quad with a FlySky FSI 6 receiver, the old school one with PWM for any audio listeners.
Huh.
And so,
yeah, I just thought it was interesting because my receiver is like, the size of half the size of a
thumbnail.
Penny.
Yeah.
And
I suppose you have to think, Cole, that traditionally these have been plane receivers. So if you had a plane with a bunch of servos, then you'd be like, oh, this is great. I've got a couple of channels free and no worries. It only gets ridiculous when you put them on little quads, and then it's like, this is weird. This is not going to work.
I wonder where their antennas are.
The original quads, people, when that came out, were flying like 450 mil stuff, like giant barbecue-sized quads.
Yeah, it wasn't a problem.
Yeah. I just thought it was interesting, and it seems like it's a bit of a. Do you guys know what kind of frame that is? Or I don't mean to sort of take too long on this, but I was just curious.
Can't tell from here.
A6B. Is that not generic. Isn't that a Source 1 or something?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
what's the jigsaw off? That's my question.
Other than the receiver, it doesn't look terrible. The camera is mounted very far back, which hints at someone either really liking how the knurled standoffs look, or perhaps not really.
I like to fly when it looks like I'm fainting and the sides are closing in very slowly.
It's like they want enhanced 4:3 aspect ratio.
Feels like a canyon racing in an open field.
No worries. Editor, if you're listening to this, feel free to cut out the sleep apnea bit. But apart from that, thank you. That is all we've got time for. This show you've been listening to, Let's Drone Out. And thank you to all our Patreons who are scrolling down the bottom there. A few of them to mention: Dominic Clifton, Chris N, Alexander, Mark
H,
Andrew
Lawrence, Caroline Tyler, Carl Cannell, Marshall McFly, BKMSE, Gabe Colan, Badger RC, Sam Dharma, Lewis Chapman, John Bertram, Robin Moore,
Stephen
Joe Thorne, some Stephen guy, Dave Powell, Wes, Aris, Dave Myers, Fraser Steen, Lee Southworth, Clive, Art Faulkner, Wynne Davis,
Richard Warwick,
Joshua Bardwell, Mr. FPV, know-it-all,
Greg Spencer,
Bloods, if you are listening, we'd like to hear about your cool camera experiments. Come talk to us.
Yeah. David, Daniel Upton, Dan Carboni, Don Robinson, Ben FX Node, Curry,
and
Redolin NZ. You definitely the difficult ones. Sawney Bean FPV.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You've been joined by the man with the moustache, Stephen.
Cheers. Have a good
Everyone's favourite curry kitten.
Bye-bye.
My personal friend, Cole.
See
Not our
ya.
friend.
And I've been bright until I fly.
Not
If you haven't had enough of me, tune in on the Thursday night show. I'm there live from 12 till 1. So in a couple of hours, where I play shitty 80s music with
take
the old
requests.
editor.
Do you
Oh.
take requests?
I didn't see
Hey,
him.
where did he
back
come from?
I know, isn't it? I keep
Hiding in
them
the
under my
back.
bed.
Hiding
no,
in plain
sorry.
sight.
I keep them under my bed.
Hasn't been moving the entire show. He's just been perfectly blocked by your silhouette the entire time. That's quite a skill.
Spooky.
I'm quite the blob. Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Night.